Okay, welcome back, class. This time we'll be looking at addition and subtraction of integers, or the 1.I/0.4 lesson in my math lab. So by integers, we just mean positive and negative whole numbers. Numbers like -3, -2, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. Basically numbers that are not fractions and or irrational. So to deal with the addition and subtraction, which should be pretty straightforward. One of the things we can do if we have multiple addition and subtraction signs is we could eliminate any double pairs of signs. So just to remind yourself of that real quick, if we have a positive number and we're adding a positive number, that would be the same as just adding the two numbers together. So for instance, saying something like 3 plus +7 is redundant. The +7 is not needed. We don't need to specify the 7 as being positive. We could simply rewrite this as 3 plus 7. And of course, that would be 10. If we had two negatives, if we're subtracting a negative number, that ends up being the same as addition. So in the case that I have something like 3 minus -7, I could rewrite that double negative as a positive. I could rewrite this as 3 plus 7. And that should kind of make sense if you're in a situation where, let's say you've got $3 in your wallet, and let's say a friend owes you $7. Well, if that friend removes their debt, that means that they've paid you the $7 they owe you. So that would be the same as taking $3 you have plus the 7 they gave you for removing their debt. And you can see that that kind of makes sense, that subtracting a negative should be the same as addition. Now the other two pairs would be a plus and a minus, or a minus and a plus. And those two, if we have for subtracting a positive number, that ends up being the same as just subtraction. And if we're adding a negative number, that ends up being the same as subtraction. So anytime we have mixed signs, one positive, one negative, we can replace it with a minus. Anytime we have same signs, positive, positive, or negative, negative, we can replace that with a plus. Okay. So in the first exercise, we're asked to just eliminate the double signs in the expression. Notice we don't have to actually calculate this amount. We just have to rewrite it without those negatives. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit more. So we can see that a little more clearly. There we go. Okay, so the -15, that's only one sign, so I would write that again. Okay, then I have subtract +4. So instead of subtracting +4, I could just write -4. And then we have plus +16. Again, adding a positive number is just the same as adding that number. And then we have plus -9, which positive negative we could write as negative, so just -9. So that's all there is to it. There'll be some problems in my math lab where you're asked to do that. Now, can we calculate this and actually find out what it is? Sure, but that's not what the directions say to do right now. Based on the directions, we're finished with that one. Okay. Now, in the next examples, we're asked to combine like terms by combining the positive terms and combining the negative terms. So since addition in the real numbers is commutative and associative, if I have a lot of numbers to add together, like say here, 13 minus 8 minus 10 plus 4 minus 5 plus 7, then I can choose to do those additions in any order that I like. And here they're asking us to do the positives together and then to do the negatives together. So we'll group them in that way. So we can say that this is equal to, looking at all the positive numbers, the 13, let's see, that would be negative, that would be negative. The 4 is positive, and then the 7 is positive. I could group those as 13 plus 4 plus 7. Okay, so I've grouped all the positive terms together. And now we're asked to group the negative terms together. So if I put a minus sign, this will count for all the terms being negative. So I don't have to rewrite those negative signs. This one negative sign does it for all the numbers I put in the parentheses here. So now we look at all the other ones, which should all be negative, the 8, the 10, and the 5. And we could just write those inside as 8 plus 10 plus 5. Okay, so there's the idea of combining positives with negatives. This is not exactly necessary to do the calculations. If we wanted to calculate this, we could have just went left to right, which is what I tend to like to do. But some people find this technique useful about grouping the positives together with the negatives separately. And then if we wanted to continue, we could just do this part and do this part and then subtract. So based on our directions, we're finished. That's what we would type in as our answer. But if you're curious, the next step, 13 plus 4 plus 7, ends up being 13 and 4 is 17, plus 7 is 24. So then we would just have to do 24 minus, and then over here we get 8 plus 10 plus 5, which is 23. And that's not a hard calculation to do. It's pretty straightforward. 24 minus 23 would be just 1. Okay. Now in the last step, we're asked to add or subtract. So that means put them all together and find some final answer. So we can either use the method that we just used about grouping the positives with the negatives, like we did up here, and then that should work. Or we could just go left or right, which is what I like to do. I like to just go left or right here. So 15 plus negative 6, we can rewrite that as 15 minus 6. And then minus positive 10, we could write as minus 10. And then minus 18. Okay. So going through this, let's see what we get. We have 15 minus 6, that would be 9. Then 9 minus 10, that would be negative 1. And then negative 1 minus 18 would be negative 19. So that would be our final result. Okay. Now, some of the calculations get a little more difficult. You'll notice as we get down to number 16, we've got to deal with numbers like 88s and 56 and 64, 48, 92, 100. Those are going to be a little more difficult to do in our head, but that's okay. I would recommend that you just use a calculator for those type of questions. Anytime the arithmetic gets a little challenging, just get a calculator out. The process is still exactly the same. Who cares how messy the numbers are?